Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Michelle Holling-Brooks here from Unbridled Change, and you're listening to Soulful Practices podcast. More beings are awakening to the call of their hearts and soul to live a life that is in alignment with their true self, launching themselves on a spiritual wellness journey for evolving their systems from being subconsciously survival-led to being consciously soul-led with all aspects of their life, with like true holistic health and wellness and being. That's the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. And yes, we want to be in alignment too within our careers, our financial life, social life, and family life, and in recreation too. While the spiritual journey of becoming aligned with our true self throughout all facets of our life is absolutely amazing, it can also feel overwhelming, lonely, isolated, and leaving us not really know where to go next on our path of awakening. This podcast is dedicated to helping you along that journey. I've been on my spiritual and wellness journey for over 25 years now and been doing this full-time as a soul companion, guide, and coach with my clients since I started Unbridled Change in 2008. And one of the main questions I'm always consistently asked is, hey, Michelle, what type of spiritual or healing and wellness practices will best support me on my journey of aligning to my true self? This podcast is the answer to that. Each week, I will share with you a new episode that brings you into the behind the scenes of my own personal soulful healing practices, and I invite you to join me in them. Each week, I'm going to be sharing with you a new soulful practice that is based off of what I like to call different pocket teachers. These are short mindful quotes, a spiritual key concept or healing concept, or a short text from a spiritual and growth teacher and wisdom teaching. And they are designed to help serve as a guide for us, a companion to us throughout that week, to help you courageously connect with the soul-led choices that will best help serve you in making the choices that will bring you into more balance so that you can live, love, and lead your authentic life. Truly going from having that desire, the intention to have a soul-led life, to embodying and unbridling your beautiful soul-led life. Again, I'm your host, Michelle Holling-Brooks, and I'm so glad you found us. Let's dive into the soulful practices for this week. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Soulful Practices. I am super excited to bring you a new pocket teacher through a new quote for this week. And the person that I picked to have this quote with is Leonard Cohen. And in case you don't know, Leonard Cohen is a singer, a songwriter, a musician, a poet, a novelist, an artist, and he invites us into the full breadth of human experience, right? And best probably known for his song Hallelujah. He was quoted as saying, "Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." So this is our pocket teacher for this week. And I love the invitations that come forward from this beautiful quote by him. And so I'll just say it again. It's forget your perfect offering. So right even there, I'm not going to edit that out, right? So forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. And that's how the light gets in. Whew, this one and I have done a dancey dance, and it has been definitely something that I would say is a huge part of my growth, both in mindsets and within my heart, and with my connection with being willing to, one, hear, and to follow those whispers and those nudges that came from my soul. Because when we seek perfection as a recovering, I like to always joke, I always say this like, hi, I'm Michelle, I'm a recovering perfectionist. It's been like 3 days since my last perfectionist moment, because it is such an addictive, self-sabotaging, shadowy tactic of our system that's designed to be a beautiful protective mechanism. However, like so many of our protective mechanisms, they actually create exactly what they're trying to step us out of, right? And so for the perfectionist, as it comes online in us as a protective mechanism and a piece of the saboteur, along with procrastination and all the other ones of self-doubt, self-abandonment, self-betrayal, really stalls us out from being willing to walk with courage, right? And one of the things of this purpose of this beautiful Soulful Practices podcast, say that 20 times, is that, we're wanting to walk courageously with the whispers of our soul, right? Connecting in, being willing to kind of step beyond those protective mechanisms, literally liberate ourselves and free ourselves up to follow, to living, leading, and loving our authentic life, right? And the perfectionist can just snuff that out faster than anybody, because it takes out the momentum and the courage that we need to follow our soul's nudges and the whispers and the like, hey, allow this to have breath in it, allow it to have air, allow it to have relatability in it, right? When we're working with perfectionist tendencies, as is my favorite saboteur flavor in my system that I've worked really had a long-standing relationship of healing and working with, it really does ask us to step into that soulful lesson that says there is gifts and imperfection. There is synchronicities. There is availability for that light, that love, that inspiration, that actual like perfect things that if we were trying to just get it all right, we're going to miss. Those cracks are actually the gold, right? And actually where that light comes in is what he's inviting us into recognizing. And as a creator being, that's something that is definitely something that we can get gummed up on and with it. So what I would like to invite you into this week with this practice is really looking at the different ways physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, financially, work-wise, like the whole holistic recreation, personal relationships, all the whole wheel of all the different wedges of your life, and which way you might be holding yourself at a standard that actually creates expectations internally and externally that are not necessarily achievable, that take us into shadow judgments, harsh inner critics, and really preventing you from allowing the beautiful cracks to let the light in, to let it breathe, and to like step into motion with that which your soul is asking for it to come through with, right? So it took me, like I said, this particular thing and I have done a long dance with. In fact, I first started kind of seeing it when I started working with the Enneagram. I came across the Enneagram pretty early in my like 20-year span, now is what I like to call it, journey of walking with soul, right? And walking into my spiritual journey, my healing journey, and putting it together. And when I first came across it, I was solidly in the healing camp of a body-mind connection. I was willing to talk to the mind and mental beliefs and limiting beliefs and looking how mindsets were really impacting our things. And I was willing to look at like the body as a messenger as far as somatics, and that it keeps the score, and that our body's reflection of when it's going out of balance or stuff like that, that there was a connection between those two. What I absolutely early on in my like early 20s was absolutely not willing to look at was this other thing called soul. I was like, nope, I'm not going to talk to that thing. I felt like it was something that I didn't have control over, that it was something that every time I followed what I thought it was saying, it brought me into these like crazy unpredictable waters, anything but perfection, right? And so when I first found the Enneagram, I didn't recognize it as a spiritual tool. I actually found it when I was taking all the different like Myers-Briggs and these different personality and typing tests so that you could find what your strengths are and leverage those strengths and then kind of work with the working edges of the quote weaknesses in your system. So that's how I first came to this thing called the Enneagram. And for those of you who don't know about the Enneagram, it's a system that was developed by way back in the right around the times when Christianity and Judaism and Muslims were all coming into fruition and into that kind of that mecca of this kind of awakening that was happening way back then. A whole group of like elders, desert fathers and quote mothers went off into like their own little part of the desert, and they were like living this idea of how do we live with spirit? How do we live in congruence with what we're up to? And the Enneagram was one of those spiritual tools that came to them to work with the 9 different ways in which we all kind of gum ourselves up, which we all get gathered up and bound up in our ego and into those survival mechanisms. These are my words now. They didn't exist way back then, right? And so it was a wisdom teaching of how to step into conscious living and to self-actualization and to walking and breathing with spirit and soul through everything we do in life. And so that was what it was originally designed for. It kind of went dark for a little bit, and then it came back in. And Gurdjieff is who is the modern day father who brought the mystic, who brought that back in. And he was kind of a rebel at the time. He was walking away from the puritanic way of working with soul. He also didn't think that just going the yogic way was the way of just overriding the body, or the sheer Buddhist way that says, you know, it's all about the mind and controlling the mind. He was like, hey, there might be a fourth way of allowing ourselves to actually live some of these mystical principles, to actually free ourselves up into more joy, more laughter, more love, more ways of being. And so he brought forward as a very gestalt, meaning an embodied way of working with spirit. Like, how is it that we get trapped in maybe desiring perfectionism? What is that about? That's a 1. Now, the interesting thing is when Gurdjieff came up with these, and I can never say his name right, so, you know, names and I have a long-standing limiting belief with each other. There's a whole story to it, and I won't bore you with it, but if you follow me for a while, you're just going to get to know that names and I think it's hilarious that I felt guided to pick doing quotes where I have to say people's names every week, because that is my gift of my imperfection. So I'm living this episode as we're recording it, and you get to see my working human nature, so to speak. So back to the Enneagram. So when he first brought it back and was given and started to work with the wisdom of the Enneagram, it didn't actually have typing in it at all. The typing came in later, and I won't bore you with all the details of how the Enneagram went through the whole shebang. And so the way most of us know and work with it now is as a strength and a weaknesses system. Oh, I'm a this, so therefore I'm really good at this and really good at that, but I have a passion for this, and I have a hiccup or a weakness, or what used to be called a sin, in this side. So while I seek perfectionism, that means I'm very detail oriented. That means I want to be true to what I say. I seek fair and justness, and this is if I identify myself as a 1, which is the perfectionist. And so this would be that the kind of the shadow side of that would be that we could get too gummed up in fairness, and we can bog ourselves down in wanting it to be just right, and actually kind of stifle and snuff out and pull ourselves away. And then we're really harsh on ourselves, and ultimately the one struggle is to let go of that and step into more flow, right? And so there's these things like lines of growth and working, blah, blah, blah. And so all of that, though, has come later on from the Western world, kind of putting it on top of these teachings. But originally it was designed to help us look at all the ways we separate ourselves from spirit. maybe we get too far into wanting to please and caretake others, and so we're walking in and trying to always nurture the other and work with the other and be of service to the other, but then we forget about ourselves, or we want to always figure something out. That's a 5. The 2 is the nurturer, right? Or we're trying to be the protector, the defender, the 8, right? Or the 9, like, no worries, we're just going to kind of go where we want to go. So we've done what we've done to almost every spiritual tool with this Enneagram thing. And that's how I originally walked into it, is like, oh, this is my personality. I'm a Myers-Briggs, an NT, what am I, an INJT or something like that. I can't remember now off the top of my head. But, it's like, it's trying to like categorize us, tell us what we're good at. And then we set up camp. And we say, this is who I am, this is what I am, and this is where I need to go to kind of become better at it, and this is what I need to back off of. We tend to do this with even things, what's the other system? Human design, if you've ever heard of that. We tend to say, oh, I'm a manifesting generator, or I'm a manifestor, or I'm a projector, or, I'm a reflector. And we lock ourselves in to these different categories, and then we only live ourselves from that. Well, that sets us outside of the law of wholeness, right? And so one of the things that I did when I took this test to begin with is I came back and it said that I was an 8, the defender, the courage, standing up for the little one, wanting to make sure that everyone's voice is heard, the one that's going to not be afraid to buck the system, to kind of be the rebel, to go against the grain. Kind of a little bit. And then the 5, the inquisitor, the one that wants to always be aware of what's happening, to bring that in and investigate and find out the why behind everything. And this thing called the 1, also, they were all even when I took my first test. And the 1 was the perfectionist, being able to put it in and put it into that ways of being. And so I really understand this of impact that the perfectionist has to tend to have on us. And what Cohen, I believe, when I feel into this quote, really took me a long time to find, is eventually I found like the first part of his quote, like something guided me, and it was like, hey, go look up where this quote come from in the bigger context. And because what you normally see when you see this quote is just that there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And these first few lines, forget your perfect offering, there's a crack in everything, that's always left off. But there's another line in front of it that usually was left off, and this was in his offering of his poem, is that ring the bells that can still ring. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So let me just say that again, because this is really your soul whispering to you to act in courageous ways, right? Ring the bells that can still ring. So this is asking us to, 1, come into present time, right? Like, don't try to go backwards and find the bells that you missed. Don't try to go forward and be like, oh, I need this bell and this bell and this bell. Like, no, like, what choices are available to us right here, right now, that we can actually ring? And then forget about trying to do it perfectly, to get the perfect resonance, the perfect echo and ripples out with whatever your offering is that you want to do with that ringing of the bell, right? Because there's a crack in everything. And that's how the light gets in. That's the special sauce, right? That's the part that brings us into connection. When it's so stark and so rigid and so quote unquote perfect, it actually stifles it. It actually mutes and muffles that poor little bell, and it can't ring. It just is like a dead, like thunk, It's in that resonance. It's in that expansion and that contraction that is where we are able to find the voice, the tone, what is wanting to be born through us and in relationship with another. Because if we're in a vacuum, there is no sound, right? It has to have something to relate to. It has to have something to play off of and to work with. And that's what's just really amazing to me, that this quote, when I feel into it, really invites us in. So our soul is always calling to us, right? It says, hey, I'm always present. I'm always with you. I'm always here to help guide you in big stuff and what you might say is little stuff. Like there are courageous moments and everyday little choices that are available to us. The bells that want to be ring, that can be rung. Okay. So this is I'm gonna not re-record any of this today. Oh, I love working with this concept within me. And it feels like there are huge moments and leaps of faith that might have tons of cracks in it, right? That are gonna drown us. And these are the things that come in with judgments. These are the things that come with embarrassments, like fears of humiliation, right? Fears of failure, fears of losing connection. And if we really sift in, ultimately what's behind this perfectionist is some version of not wanting to lose our connections or to lose belonging, right? That if we aren't perfect, if our offering isn't perfect, if the email that we turn in, or the podcast that we release, or the post, or the blog, or the offering that we have at work, or to a family member, or to a loved one, if somehow there's a crack in it, that then cracks our voice, and that then somehow keeps us from being worthy, right? To being loved, to being accepted. Like instead, we're going to hit a harsh wall that's going to push us back and say, no soup for you. Pull that one away from you. It's going to point at the crack and say, that's it. I'm out, right? And so when that happens, when we allow this perfectionist to get in there, the reason why it belongs to the archetypal pattern of the saboteur is because it's really keeping us from stepping into our flow, stepping us into our true empowerment. That ability to feel like, okay, I'm doing this, what I like to call my personal best. So the other archetypal pattern that you can slide in there and kind of work with is helping the perfectionist release that uncontrollable siphoningness and that protective stance and open up to like a balanced, beautiful athlete in the light, meaning I'm going to go for my personal best. And I understand that my personal best is, showing up in good confidence, putting my best foot forward, trying for what I am, for the circumstances that I'm in, and being really happy with that. Also knowing that it's always going to have a working edge, right? It's always going to have a little crack in it. And that's what Cohen is inviting us into seeing, is that crack is not something to be embarrassed about or ashamed about or harsh inner critic to ourselves about. It's something to be embraced because we don't know what amount of light, breath, relational ability, connectability is going to come from what we view as a crack and somebody else might view as something completely beautiful to connect with. So back to the Enneagram. I didn't lose it in my roundabout circle of what we were talking about. Like I said, when I first stumbled on it, I took it just as an assessment, right? But as I kind of came back to me, I kind of took it, I was like, yeah, that's absolutely true. I am a defender. I'm the advocate for the voiceless. And I love to like kind of quote unquote have that rebel streak in me that swims upstream and goes the direction that I feel called to go. And absolutely, I want to know everything and why something's working, that 5. And yeah, I want it to be good. I want it to look good. I want it to be presentable and not have something somebody can point at and judge and ding me with, right? And when I came back to the Enneagram about 10 years into my journey, I found it in my mid 30s. Again, it kind of came back forward and worked its way into my consciousness yet again. And this time I was just starting to come out of only being mind body centered. And I was actually like being physically, from what was happening in my physical body, being given the invitation and the opportunity to truly work in that holistic way, mind, body, and soul. And look at this thing called soul and say, hey, I think you're a part of my system. I don't really like you because I don't feel like I can control you, but maybe that's the point. Maybe I have some control issues that I need to let go of, and I need to open up to being able to work with more flexibility within myself and within the whole, right? And maybe this control is actually like crushing me, and maybe this perfectionist thing and I are having a dance, right? And because I had done so much work of identifying stories, understanding limiting beliefs, I've been working with parts work, IFS, internal family systems. I understood that we have different points of view within us. When I came back to the Enneagram, all of a sudden I saw it. I saw it as the spiritual tool and companion that it really was originally housed in. It originally wasn't housed to type us and to get us to like step into our thing. It was to invite us into all the different ways and at the different protective mechanisms, the different egoic kind of shadow ways that we would bolster ourselves up. And in those, cutting ourselves off from believing, hearing, and following our inner guidance, from holding ourselves off into like what I call, oh, I have my spiritual hat on now, but now I have on my everyday cap. And there are two different versions of me. And what if none of that is true? And so when I came back to the Enneagram, it was really clear to me to see that the 8, the defender, was a protector, right? That was all the wounded parts of me that felt like somehow they weren't seen, felt, and heard, and they wanted a champion. And so I was like, I'm going to be that champion for myself and for everybody else. Well, and it's kind of like, so you roll, step it back. Like, where is that needed and where is that not needed? And can we get some discernment in here? And then on the investigator side, you know, I really started to realize that need for understanding why and being able to explain it to other people and finding and understanding all the different things. One, I was trying to predict what was going to happen and how it was going to happen. So it was really fear-based. And then two, if I could understand it and I could explain it to somebody who, what, when, where, and why, and I could understand what they wanted and why they wanted, I could give it to them. So it was a really savvy protector that was designed to get belonging, to get acceptance, to get that ability to feel that I was able to be in connection with somebody, right? And that then I had value and worth to them because I could help them understand themselves. And then once I saw those two, I was like, oh, this perfection thing, this one, and the part of me that was driving both of those from the shadow was this real desire that if I could create the perfect thing, if I could eat well, if I could exercise, if I could show up, if my offerings through work, my personal relationships, if I could show up as clean and as perfect as I could, I'd be accepted. I'd be loved. I wouldn't be embarrassed. I wouldn't get dinged. I wouldn't, like people would see that I had value and worth. And so all of them were trying to drive me from the shadows, from this place of belonging, right? And this place of wanting connection. And it was crushing. And not only was it crushing to me, when I really started working the Enneagram again and releasing myself from being attached to a point. So when I teach the Enneagram now, if people want to type themselves, great. It's a way to start, but then I invite them to look at all 9 points and to really allow themselves to work with each one individually. In fact, I have a beautiful offering. I'll put it in the notes below so you can go look at that. If that's calling to you, that you can work with both movement. I have different beautiful movements in there, from energy exercises to sounding, so using your voice with mantras and working with that, and mixing with journaling and relationships. It's a beautiful little practice to help bring alignment, mind, body, and soul, all three, bringing those together. That once I started to realize it, I realized that when I was attached to that perfectionism, it was so stifling to those around me, because even though it was internal within me, I wasn't requiring perfectionism from them. The standard I was holding for myself made it feel like they couldn't do anything to meet my needs. They couldn't meet me, they couldn't support me, they couldn't be in that life with me. And I realized just how much harm I was doing in my work life and my personal life and every aspect of me with this crushing perfectionism, right? So as a result, I wasn't ringing any bells. And when I did ring them, they were completely muffled and stifled. So they couldn't ripple out. They couldn't interact and work with each other and balance and harmonize with each other. It was just all muffled clangs and nothing else. So one of the things that I would love to invite you into as we start to work with this week's practice of is to bring in the full quote. So now I'll say it again. Ring the bells that can still ring, present time. Forget your perfect offering. That's not the name of the game. There's always going to be cracks, and those cracks is how the light gets in, right? So just take a moment and feel into this, knowing that we're talking to protectors, right? We're talking to ways in which we thought we needed to be with ourselves and with others, and what we offer emotionally, physically, spiritually to ourselves and to others in order to gain belonging, acceptance, to not be humiliated, to not be made fun of, to be accepted. That's really what's at the heart of every perfectionist, right? That's really what's at the heart of every time when we're searching for other things to ring that were in the past or potential future, and we're missing the ones that are right now. So let's dive into the four beans of you. Check in your body, your mind, your heart, and your soul. And let's start our practice with this intention of throughout this week, really inviting ourselves to gain greater comfort with the gifts of imperfection, and also gain awareness of the ways in which that protective mechanism of perfectionism is trying to help us, and why and how, and where is that true, and where is that something that's an old tape that maybe it's time to let that go, to free ourselves up, liberate that freedom of movement that can be a part of this, right? So let's start with checking in with the body first. So go ahead and take a few deep breaths in and out. And we're just opening to that beautiful Reiki energy to help hold us, hold you as you do this investigation, and to be with you throughout the week as you have this little antenna up of cultivating greater comfort with the gifts of imperfection, getting curious about it versus dinging yourself with a harsh inner critic. And just see what messages in view of how the body talks through somatic sensations. So a feeling of tightness or open, shaky, kind of a constriction. What do you feel in or around your body towards this invitation of cultivating greater comfort with seeing the cracks as gifts where the light gets to come in? Gifts of our imperfection. What are you feeling in or around your body? And it can be more than one thing. Parts of you might be going, oh, I am so ready to take this weight off my shoulders, to put this down, to like loosen my grip on this. Parts of you might be like, oh my gosh, if we aren't perfect, that's going to game over, you know? Do not pass go. My whole life is going to crumble down. Don't try to judge it. Let it catastrophize whatever it needs to do. Just really invite yourself into the different things that might be present. And now opening up to the mental being, what parts of you and their stories, their thoughts, their belief systems might be present for you right now along this idea of how perfectionism was trying to help protect you. So like mine, it was a shield from potential judgments, potential rejection, potential like showing up in a way that somebody could make fun of, right? So ultimately, it was trying to help me belong and connect and keep me safe. So what are yours with this beautiful thing? You might have some of the same ones. Now opening up, if you can, just ask for that Reiki energy to help hold those different parts of you. Open up to the heart being. So once we find our protectors on the outside, then we can open up to what are some of the parts of us that still need to be tended to? So this is where we might find some of those wounded parts, those young parts, right? The part that brought home a test that they worked really, really hard on, and they were like, hey, I did well. And it was met with disappointment, and it was met with, well, but that one thing was wrong. And so therefore, the excitement and the joy and the connection wasn't available to you, right? That's just one example of what you might see when you come into your heart's place. And we want to meet those parts of us, tend to them, let them know now that that's not the same situation, that we can validate ourselves, love ourselves, right? You might notice that these practices build off of each other. So building off of to be able to like ourselves, to be as we are, right? And to be willing to move into those uncomfortable new places of truth and expansion. And so, what little parts are there? Where might your heart be inviting you to say yes? Yes to creating this sense of openness with letting the cracks allow light to pour through. And then that brings us to our soul being. What whispers, nudges, compassionate, like inquiries and questions does your soul want you to lean into this week, so that you can begin to become aware and identify, accept, and then free yourself up, liberate yourself from those constricting, crushing restraints of the perfectionist, right? And really allow ourselves to walk with the personal best. Like, how does your soul feel about that concept? What does it want you to open to? Of walking with in good faith and commitment to following your soul's guidance, doing the best you can, and then letting it ring, right? Letting those ripples go out. So this week, I invite you to join me in this beautiful healing practice as we cultivate greater comfort with the gifts of imperfection. So I'm setting my intention to notice when I am allowing the illusion of perfectionism to cause me to self-sabotage, right? Myself, my offerings, relationship with other people, and to get curious about what is happening within me in that moment. What part of me is nervous, concerned, confused? And then I would love for in that moment to guide my attention to the awareness of what those protective fears are and how they're causing me to override my guidance. So maybe it's causing me to, I hear, Michelle, that's great, hit send, right? So now I'm overworking or I'm second guessing. Did I get that right? Is that perfect? Is that sentence giving me the perfect piece of information? Or did I share with that person exactly? Do they understand what I'm coming from? Can I soften that and trust more in faith, right? Where is it stopping me from even moving into action, right? Like I'm not ringing the bell that can be rung. It's sitting in front of me. There's like the little striker in hand, and I'm getting that inspiration, and I'm just like arms folded and going, nope, not gonna do it. And get curious, what's in that, right? Where is it restricting my voice, right? This fifth chakra area for us to be able to express ourselves, to be in creation, to mix that fifth chakra with our beautiful second chakra of creation and inspiration, bringing in that seventh, right? So when I find myself getting pulled back or tapping the brakes or folding my arms and shaking my head no to my inner guidance, like help me pause in that moment. Help me find a way to soften and be willing to turn towards my inner world to see what part of me is lost in a protective story. What part of me is afraid of an old situation happening here, and is that still true, right? And then in that pause, help my attention flow to the inner courage and acceptance that will help me release myself from that illusion, that protective spell of perfectionism, because it's not real, right? It's the exact opposite of what it will bring forward, right? So that I can access new levels of freedom to share myself with at other aspects of myself, and then also to share my offerings with others and allow others to share their offerings with me. Because that was a really kind of key thing. When I finally saw this, I was like, not only is it stifling the resonance that I could offer to others, I'm completely stifling the resonance that others can offer to me, to support me. And I was really shutting down other people's soul's guidance and inspirations because I could feel in my field I had a zero tolerance for anything that had a crack. And so that was preventing the other. So part of this week, maybe that if you worked, oh, something in the fifth chakra's off with that. If you worked a lot on your side, is maybe to look at how that's affecting other people in your world, right? And again, it's not to bash yourself, it's to free yourself up. It's to give yourself love, compassion, kindness, and forgiveness, and then invite yourself into a different way of being. So the last part is asking, what do I need to see, to feel, to hear, to know right now so that I can open to the light that is held within these cracks, so I can engage them and I can allow the resonance to ripple out. So help me listen, help me match, and help me step into creative action that matches that inner guidance. So this is the practice that I am committing to this week. I hope that it's helpful for you. I'd love to hear how this is working with you. Feel free to share, what areas of your life you're befriending imperfections with, seeing kind of the weight of maybe some version of this within your own life, and really how that helps free you up, liberate you to asking that beautiful question, what wants to be shared through me right now? What wants to be shared through another to me right now that I would have stifled, muted, stopped in the past? And how can I step into a new choice with that? So this is our practice for this week of Soulful Practices. I hope that this beautiful quote by Leonard Cohen is supportive for you, allowing us to really step into ring the bells that can still ring, forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. This is Michelle Hollingbrooks with Soulful Practices, and I can't wait to hear how it's going for you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Thank you again for joining me in this episode of Soulful Practices. I'm honored to be a guide for you on your spiritual and wellness journey. Your commitment to becoming soul-led within your life is a gift to both yourself and to every being. Together, as we become more aligned with our true self, we truly do create those ripples of light, of love, of joy that goes out to all beings and empowers us all. So please share what parts of this practice spoke to you. Share with us your ahas or how this practice is working with you throughout the week as you go throughout your daily life. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so that you can stay up to date with the next soulful practice and pocket teacher that wants to help you create that courageous connection to your soul-led life. If you feel called to share this podcast with your friends and family or to write a review, please do so, because it will help increase that beautiful circle of soul-led companions throughout this world. Together, we can create a beautiful, soulful conversation, connections with others, and help each other on our journey. Like Ram Dass says, we are all just walking each other home. Again, this is your host, Michelle Hollingbrooks. Until we meet again in the next Soulful Practice episode, offering you a blessing of light, of love, of joy on your journey.